We always talk about the good things, the fun things, the happy things, but you know what? A lot of us do have that little bit of edginess there. So, what's the most evil thing you've done in a D&D game? Us D&D players can never really get enough. Whether you play 3 times a week or once a month, part of you always craves more. We get our fix however we can, by watching short stories online, D&D live streams, Baldur's Gate. Well, allow me to offer you something new. The best available follows a party of new adventurers trying to make a name for themselves in hopes of being sponsored in a competition. Waterdeep's Festival of Heroes, which sees the chosen parties delving into the depths of Undermountain, risking life and limb to suppress the evils and monsters below to protect the city above. The Dungeon of the Mad Mage is filled with danger, treasure, glory, and mysteries yet to be revealed. Come watch the journey from humble beginnings into heroic legend as we adapt a campaign years in the making into an illustrated web series with art from Doodle Poodle, author of Tales from the Tables. We pride ourselves in converting hours-long sessions into smoothly paced episode with limited animation, music, blood, sweat, and tears. Get in on the ground floor of something great and join the Forever DMs table today. Link in the description. My character was a bitter, drunken lichen due to a Faustian covenant he made rather than die. When the party found the skeletal remains of another member's father, he mocked his comrade's remorse because from his perspective, he was lucky for being dead. My DM considered an alignment shift over this moment. That's pretty harsh. Eric Silvermane, my soon-to-be Oathbreaker paladin, had been having a very heated argument with Helm for the past 10 or so sessions. Helm had guided him for his entire life, yet did not help him when he needed it most, through extremely difficult and important character events, developments, and growth. So, my party was venturing through the Underdark to claim an important quest item related to one of our members' backstories. By this point, Arik had been put through the ringer with emotional damage, having died and spent 8 in-game hours in hell. His soul was sold by another party member to a demon to rid themselves of a lethal curse, which, due to the time dilation, was actually 80 years in hell of non-stop 360 degrees of constant combat. Oh, don't worry, the party member was forgiven, and all is well. Now you see, Eric had studied different bestiaries all his life and was an expert archaeologist raised by a town of historians. So, when there was a horde of kobolds in our path, Arik suspected the worst. They all had weapons in their hands and were gathered in front of a dwarf settlement. One might think simply avoiding them through a different path or investigating would have been the superior option, correct? Well, Arik, in all of his built-up rage and anger, cast command with the order, "Don't move," on the horde of 100 plus kobolds. Not knowing we were there and not knowing the spell was cast, they did not obey. And due to their default low health, they were instantly slaughtered by the spell's base damage. When the dwarves started to freak out as we came near, we discovered that the kobolds were actually completely innocent slaves holding simple mining equipment. Among them were dozens of children. Helm appeared before me and projected their souls lingering above their bodies, horrified and distraught. He revoked my title of his champion and stripped my magic away from me. Due to my pent-up rage against him and the trauma from being in hell for almost a century, I turned into a barbarian fighter multiclass. He never forgave himself for it, even though he knew he wasn't in his right mind and hadn't been for weeks. When all your life your god turns on you, spits on you, and refuses to help you during moments of crisis, and then punishes you for a moment that you cannot control in full, that is no god of yours. So, my sweet, beautiful dragonborn barbarian, I hope I don't butcher the name, Salamandastrum, was the father apparent of Rexus, the cutest little kobold that ever was. Rexus was a much-loved member of the party and an established sneak thief. During an expedition to an underground vampire stronghold, another PC, an elven sorcerer, encouraged Rexus to do a sweep of the area. Check for the number of enemies, that sort of thing. Well, Rexus was being played by the DM and thus did the sweep. Now, unfortunately, the dice were not so friendly that session, and the cutest little kobold that ever was slain. The DM ended the session there. The following session, we attempted to infiltrate the stronghold and did so successfully. We took out a few vampires, but were ultimately forced back to the surface, unable to retrieve the body of Rexus. That ended the next session. Out of game, I spoke with the elven sorcerer and said that Sal would be devastated and emotional in the form of unbridled fury. I asked if they would be interested in a conflict between the two, because it was their character's encouragement that led Rexus to go out and search. Sal urged caution. The sorcerer, however, said yes, they'd be interested, and I mentioned the idea of rolling for a breath weapon attack. They loved it. During a heated argument between the two, the aforementioned dice roll landed on the side of the breath attack. Sal grabbed the sorcerer and let forth a raw, furious fire. Now, we were at 7th level, and thus 3d6 brought 14 points of fire damage, killing the sorcerer, who, due to the vampires, was only at 11 HP. Sal's words were, "You offered them my son, and they took them from me!" As the torrent of flame engulfed the face, head, and shoulders of the sorcerer. The rest of the party was not happy having to waste a resurrection. Sal, however, was made even angrier as the sorcerer was given a second chance at life, which Rexus, his son, was denied. Sal became very bitter towards the sorcerer, and a long-standing, mutual conflict began. The sorcerer had died 2 times after that. The sorcerer has now suffered 3 deaths in total, and Sal wanted to ensure that the 4th was permanent. It was. Now again, I spoke with the sorcerer out of game and said that Sal would want to try and kill the sorcerer. The player understood, and due to some upcoming circumstances away from the game, further sessions weren't going to come as often, so they agreed that it would be an impactful story beat. We called it a divergence, so that the sorcerer could still exist in one reality, but was dead in this one. I asked all but the sorcerer and the DM to leave the table for an RP scene. And in the middle of the night during Sal's watch, his battle axe, redubbed Rexus, split the sleeping sorcerer from groin to collarbone. The party never saw Sal again. Fun times, debatable as to its evil nature, as it was a father grieving the death of his son. That grief, though, led to the death of a sorcerer seeking to serve the realm. For coin, anyway. After that, Sal became a force to be reckoned with in the realm, slaying monsters and those that would seek to do harm. Unfortunately, rage can blind one to reality, and many not-so-evil souls were cast under his blade. Following this arc, he was found by a merchant sailor pirate, the father of my rogue, and in time would go on to serve as his first mate and mentor the rogue. Rest in peace, Rexus. Gone, but not forgotten. Future me here, by the way, just realized after writing this that though we never returned to the vampire stronghold, Rexus, in a way, became a vampire, feasting on the blood of Sal's enemies in the form of his axe. As a GM, I designed a 10-floor dungeon with dangerous enemies and traps for a short campaign with a group of professional monster hunters and ruin explorers. But there was a big caveat: there was no loot. The god to whom the temple was dedicated held 2 major portfolios of divine authority: greed and generosity. This is important later on. So when the temple was abandoned, all the wealth was given out to the people. Not even the minions and bosses in the dungeon had any gear. Most monsters were oozes, ghosts, insects, and elementals. The only loot in the ruins was the stuff that was left behind by other adventurers. The final boss was located in a hidden treasury. The room was filled with chests, and the party who played it cheered at the sight. But when one of them tried to open a chest after looking for traps and noticing it was not locked, they got promptly swallowed by a giant mouth of nasty teeth. Then, all the other 20 chests in the room began to move and chomp at the adventurers. All of them were mimics. There were only a few hundred gold coins and gemstones that the other adventurers had left in the mimics while being digested. The party spent more gold on their food than what they found in this massive empty husk of a dungeon. They declared that they would invade the divine realm of the god of giving and taking and began a personal crusade against all of their followers, temples, and shrines. Most of these people were neutral and good aligned. Most of those shrines and temples were established to help kleptomaniacs get past their bad habits to give to the poor. The group, however, did not realize this until they ended up with a 10,000 gold bounty after they burnt down the High Temple in the capital, which also acted as a shelter for orphans to prevent them from becoming pickpockets. And that's how I made a group of goody-goody two-shoes adventurers commit mass murder on innocent believers. Ta-da! The more you know. Here's the thing though, I didn't actually plan this, but I let them do it because they did not bother to even investigate anything about the mostly peaceful religion. It wasn't even a secret, really. They had all the lore for all the gods in the nation. I am far more lenient than I used to be, of course, and will offer advice to my players if they seem to be making decisions that would break or twist their characters towards a direction they had not planned. As a player, I once played as an orc barbarian in a one-shot I got invited to. The concept was simple. A group of veteran adventurers trying to solve a series of murders in the city. Every character was pre-made, but we could still edit some of their descriptions and alignments. Now, my character in particular got insulted a lot and attacked a lot by the NPCs, but he never reacted. My character never openly reacted to insults. He even gave somber advice to angry people just venting. You'd think he was either neutral or good aligned, right? Oh no, he was lawful evil. After we cleared the murderers and were given high status in the country, and nation in fact, my character took the list of names and told the ruler of the land about every insult he'd been called by every single individual who had treated him with racist disdain. But he never mentioned who among the party had been the target of these abuses. The ruler asked what my character would like to do with this information, and my character said,
"These people have committed a great insult to the nobility of these lands, willing to assault even those working to stop a vile murderer. Their punishment should fit the crimes made, of course, but the severity of treating a noble and hero like this is a grave matter, best handled by the crown. In my lands and among my people, those who would cause such harm to nobility would be either exiled or sold into slavery."
The only reason this worked was that the GM had told us in some of our investigations that the king was a half-elf and had experienced a lot of bad treatment as a child. He would punish anybody who committed such acts harshly, even fellow nobles. The list had around 230 people, of which 60 or so were of high nobility rank. These people never openly committed these acts, but my character even allowed the royal court wizard to cast a spell on him to have him tell the truth. And he did, by the way, but he managed to twist it just a little bit so he never mentioned who was the specific person being targeted by the racism. The party consisted of an elf, a half-elf, a gnome, a dwarf, and my half-orc. All the NPCs on the list were either humans or elves. So the GM asked me to roll a diplomacy check. I rolled a 19 plus 2 with a 14 charisma, and that's a big number, and the king basically declared that those on the list of higher status would be stripped of their ranks in society and exiled from the lands, while those of lesser statuses would be sold into slavery and given to the party to serve them for 10 years. Around 10% of the country's higher-ranking people, merchants, knights, lords, priests, and so on, got exiled for their racist demeanors, and we got over 100 people as slaves for 10 years. My last note to the GM told him that my character would torture and kill each of these exiles and slaves until none of them remained, since the law no longer protected them. He would end up murdering over 20 times the people the mass murderer had killed in the capital. That group never invited me again. I think the GM got uncomfortable with what I did in retaliation for the racial slurs and insults that my orc received. I didn't really mind those things. They fit the lore and the character. But honestly, I guess they just didn't like the way I handled my character's retaliation, which was understandable. Hey everybody, Brian Von V8. If you want to keep the lights on and get some early access to all of our stories and videos, possibly some outtakes, make sure to join our membership. Yeah, we finally opened up memberships just for all of you boys, girls, and everyone in between. Also, make sure to like, subscribe, ring that bell, and let us know in the comments below, what's the most evil thing that you've done in a D&D game? We love you all. Please be safe, happy, and healthy. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.